There's a little.
I see in those bars.
Yeah.
I should
In
have,
the participant window.
brought my
Actually, I'll move
grandfather's
this one to the
banjo.
screen.
Vamped already. I'm trying to teach myself how to play this banjo.
Little music.
Yeah.
Waiting room.
I'm glad you're here to do that, Paul, because there's no way I would.
Well, you know, what some towns use is like somebody off to the side just running it. Yeah, that's pretty simple to do. Well,
And
all
that's,
right, so,
that's what I'll be asking Eric
yeah.
also, how they do it.
All right, so it's 7:00. We'll get the meeting. We started at 6:30 with the warrant, and now we'll resume with the business meeting. So first order of business, I noted in the agenda to accept the minutes of 2:28. I meant 2:14. And Anna, I given you a couple comments. You took care of that?
I took care of
There was
that.
typos.
Yeah.
Was there any other comments?
Just
Bob
one.
found the
I had mine.
typo too. We will make.
I have a comment on the trio update. It said we hope to include in the 2023 budget.
Yeah.
We're working on the 2022.
No, the
No.
next budget's 2023.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
the way the
Oh, the
fiscal
next
year
one
works.
is
22,
2023.
23.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
we're in the 2022 budget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to
I'll-
accept the
I'll
minutes
ex-
as amended then.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
And actually updated them and Bob had
And I had one.
So they're already updated?
Yep.
already
Yeah,
updated.
Okay.
I'll second.
From Ken Elliott. All right, all in favor? All right, so moving on, and I won't take any time now because of all of our invited guests, but in addition to the draft agenda, I've got kind of a list of additional things that we're gonna cover tonight, including a application for a grant from the John P. Gorman Foundation, question about Kennebec County and whether they might use money for ARPA. There was a question from somebody about the sign on the North Road, the Welcome to Mount Vernon sign, the one that's like really bad.
Oh, yeah, that is.
And a few other things like that.
Uh-oh.
But let's just stick with the first part of the, and then of course later on, Tom Carey's gonna
Tom.
join us. We'll go into executive session for that, just because it's an attorney visit or whatever, but that'll be at the end. So with no further ado, we're gonna first start out with the National Digital Equity Center. So Susan, right?
So if I could just make a few remarks to introduce our guests. I know we have about 40 minutes and I'll not to take too much of that, but first I want to thank the select board for giving us this time. I think it's important because our committee has been making a tremendous amount of progress recently since we last spoke. And our guests this evening are really critical to us continuing to make that kind of progress. I want to thank our guests for coming. Susan Corbett is the founder and executive director of the National Digital Equity Center in Wiscasset. And John Doherty is the vice president and general manager of Mission Broadband out of Bangor. I know we have a limited time, so I'll be unusually brief for me. That's not necessarily really brief, but I just wanted to mention some of the progress we've made that we need to continue before we hand this off to Susan. We have 3 proposals for developing modern that are in our hands today, and we expect a 4th and last proposal in a week or so. We've begun to receive returns from the postcard campaign that our communications work group sent out to get more email addresses and to encourage people to take speed tests for their internet connections. And the latter, a very critical activity that you'll hear over the next few months, because we know the state has a database that's inaccurate in counting what kind of speed we have in our town, and we need to collect actual data on a house by house basis to correct that. We've decided as a committee to schedule 3 public meetings, and I'm optimistic that those will be able to be in person as well as with Zoom. And so now I'm going to just introduce the guests very briefly because they're going to play such a critical role for us. Susan will help us prepare a digital equity and inclusion plan. I'm going to let her tell you what that means and answer some questions.
Vernon,
This was on the agenda last week, and
Mark
I'm just
Gillis
asking
on
for
Vernon.
you to approve our agreement with her. Just 2 things about what she's going to do. First of all, she's not making a plan for us. She's going to help us prepare a plan and execute it in a sustainable way. She's not going to give us a fish. She's going to teach us how to go fishing. Secondly, paying attention to digital equity will not only provide an avenue for all of our citizens and voters to step into the 21st century, but it's going to differentiate us from towns that are competing for scarce grant dollars. You hear about the hundreds of millions of dollars that are out there, but believe it or not, it's not enough to take care of everybody in Maine, so we need to get an edge. I'll just say a few words about John before I introduce him after your discussion with Susan. But now, Susan, I'm going to turn this over to you. We're asking for the $2,500 fee with an agreement with you. And just to remind the select board, that would reduce the balance of $3,550 that's already been approved to $1,050, which will not pay for John Doherty's work. But we'll talk about that later. Thank you, Susan.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to your meeting. I had the pleasure of presenting to the Broadband Committee a month or so ago, and we talked about why is digital equity and digital inclusion important. A digital equity and digital inclusion plan includes many different things. It includes a plan for affordability, a plan for affordable devices, for digital literacy training, for public computer access. It helps create a team to become broadband digital equity advocates for your community. When we do this plan, we'll do a deep dive into the demographics and really understand who makes up your community. What are the special things that are going on in Mount Vernon. And then we're going to put all of this together in a report, but we'll have some meetings with the Broadband Committee and whoever else is going to be on that team to guide us, and so that it becomes your plan. You are in charge of this. My job is to help facilitate it and to give you a plan that you can execute easily for your community. It's a plan also that can help you figure out, do you need to raise funds, for instance, for affordable broadband? So digital equity and digital inclusion is important. As Bill said, we want everyone in your community to access the internet and to use it and feel comfortable and to understand the importance of it. I like to say that the infrastructure that John and his team are going to talk about is the how. How are we going to get everybody connected? And digital equity is the why. Why is this important? We know it's important for people to connect to healthcare providers, to participate in remote learning, become a remote worker, and we want to make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind. And when you build a network, you have to have a plan for affordability, because what you want to make sure that everyone is participating, that you're not leaving anyone behind because they can't afford that connection. So we're gonna do some deep dive into that with your community. So we're thrilled to be working with you. We'll work with your community. We'll be working with John and his team, and make sure that you have a plan that you can move forward. One last thing that I just want to talk about in the why digital equity and digital inclusion plans are so important. If you're going to build a network, and it sounds like that's the path you're moving forward in, then you want to make sure that as many people as possible subscribe to that network. And one of the reasons that you want to do that is because return on investment matters. And the more people who subscribe, the better the return on investment. So it's a twofold purpose. One is the services that you're providing, the services and that your community can participate in, And the second is that you want to make sure that you can financially support that network. So we're pleased to be working with all of you, and we're excited about where this is all going to go. Usually look at about a 6 to 8 week turnaround time on these plans, and we'll have meetings off and on with your broadband committee and whoever else needs to be on that meeting between now and when the report is finally finished. So thanks so much for letting me talk about this tonight. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Susan. Questions you guys?
One time,
That's a one-time fee.
Regarding, past performance. Have you seen where communities have done this type of engagement and they, is it common to find sources, grant funding sources to kind of go along with this, or how does that play in?
That's a really great question. And prior to the passing of the infrastructure bill, I probably would have a different answer. But the Infrastructure and Job Act bill includes a component called the Digital Equity Act. In the Digital Equity Act, there's multiple millions and billions of dollars. There's actually $2.7 billion allocated for the Digital Equity Act across the country. We don't know what that's going to mean for Maine and how much money Maine is going to get, but we're hoping that for all infrastructure that there may be funding for some of these digital inclusion components. So we'll be looking at that as you all move forward. That said, there's also private philanthropy. Maine Community Foundation has supported the work, digital equity work. The John T. Gorman Foundation has supported it. So there's a couple different avenues that we can look at of potential funders because it may be a bit before we actually see funding that's actually going to hit the ground coming in from the Infrastructure and Job Act. But we have some resources. Island Institute supports all of this work, so that will be part of that report of making sure we give you the funding and to support this work.
And Susan, do you also work with school districts? I know that early on in the pandemic, there were families that didn't have broadband, but the kids needed to be on, Zoom remote learning. Is there some tie-in with that as well?
Yes, with the onset of the pandemic, we actually worked with the Department of Education around this and helped them navigate getting devices, hotspots, into the hands of students who either they didn't have broadband access at all, or their families couldn't afford it, or there wasn't enough of a broadband connection to connect everybody in the household that needed to be on a remote connection. We were also working with several different schools. We work with Maine Indian Education. We get them, as they're looking at plans to build out broadband, they're purchasing devices or hotspots for their students to ensure that all the students are connected. And we have a couple other smaller school systems around the state that we've done work with. So it's part of your whole plan in building broadband is to make sure that all of your students and everyone has access to the internet.
Yeah.
Susan, are there towns nearby you've worked with, do you know?
Are there other towns that
Nearby us?
So the town of Searsport, you may want to talk to that broadband committee. We did they're just a great example. We did a digital equity, digital inclusion, and they have followed it really closely. They have figured out, their newest thing is figuring out an additional subsidy we thought could work. Right now, for every, there's the FCC affordable connectivity program, which provides, if they meet the income eligibility requirements, they'll get $30 per month off their broadband bill, as long as the provider, the ISP, is a participating provider with FCC. And what Searsport did is said, well, we don't think $30 is enough, so we're looking at we want to look at additional funding for those families. We don't want to leave any family behind if we're going to build broadband out in our community. So Searsport's a great example to look to them. I'd recommend talking to them and asking them about that. I think it's an important thing to do.
Susan, I'm glad you mentioned that $30 discount. Is that somewhat universal, or does it really depend on the provider as far as families? I mean, it's typically families that already qualify for like reduced lunch, or they're already on some other program. What can you tell us about that? Maybe John will add something later on that too, but what can you tell us about that?
So prior to the AC, what's called the ACP program, there was the emergency broadband benefit, which was an EBB. You probably heard something about that. That provided a $50 per month subsidy. In Maine, most of the providers are participating providers they were participating in the EBB program. Bill, did you want to jump in?
Well, I just wanted to mention all of the providers that submitted proposals to us participated, at least in the FCC program. I don't know about the other one.
Okay, that's the $30 one. Okay.
If they were qualified under the EBB program, they automatically were qualified under the ACP program.
Okay.
So, and it hasn't come out in public yet, but I can pretty much assure you, for any of the Connect Maine or the Maine Connectivity Authority money, and especially the funding that's going to come from the federal government, you haven't seen it yet, but you will. It will require that either the provider who's applying for funds or the community that's applying for funds, that the provider has to be a participating ISP at affordable connectivity program. And so affordability is a big deal for the governor, and so this helps address that. $30 a month isn't, it's a nice discount, but it's going to depend, and this is going to be part of what we're going to talk about with the digital equity and digital inclusion plan. It may not be enough for some of your families, and so we're gonna look at that real deeply. What's the demographics? How many families are poverty level? Is there you don't want to leave families behind. In the series, we estimate that 25% of your families have family median income of 25K or less. That matters, right? Because if they're going to build broadband, you don't want to leave a quarter of all of your residents behind because they can't afford it. And so that's why they're looking for solutions for that to address it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're good?
Yep, that sounds nice.
Thanks, Susan.
Go ahead, Bill.
So Paul, just before we turn it over to John, we're asking for a vote on the agreement with digital equity this evening. Would you like to wait until John is finished?
Yeah, we'll cogitate over that later. I think if that's all right with you guys here, we'll just keep going on the presentation.
Okay, so now to introduce John Doherty, the short story here is, but suffice to say, we need his expert help to continue the momentum that we've experienced recently, and we need him in at least two major things. First, we need to evaluate the proposals that we've received technically and financially. Technically meaning, does the technology that's proposed make sense for us? Does it work? How long is it going to help us to meet our needs? Sorry about that. I'll just turn it off.
You can't keep yourself down,
So the first thing is technical and financial. The second is helping us get grant funding. John's been there, done that. We've talked to references. None of them was in his family, and they all raved about their ability to help us. So there's other tasks that we're undoubtedly going to need. And originally we asked for a proposal with a list of tasks, but it became clear to us that the needs that we have are going to change a little bit over time. We know we need to evaluate proposals. We know we're going and need help for the millions of dollars of grant money that's out there. But there's other things in communications, helping us get ready for town meeting, things like that. But anyway, I'm going to let John tell you a little bit about his company and what they're going to do for us, and then there'll be time for questions as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Good talking to you, Council. So yeah, Mission Broadband, we started this company in April of 2019. And the intent was to try to help solve broadband across the United States and the gaps that existed. And, really what we understand, Susan's been at it for a long time as well, it's a return on investment, right? These companies are out there to make a profit, which they are, nothing wrong with that. We're not we're a for-profit company as well. So making a profit is reasonable. And, the problem was, as you've seen, it's, hit or miss as to who the carrier is and how they deliver it. And is there enough, houses, subscribers, potential subscribers per mile, per square mile? And, it all just comes down to, is there a return on investment? So the traditional phone companies, they're required to give you telephone services, not required to give you broadband. Same with the other providers that are in the area. So, we looked at that, done a whole lot of work with the founder of the company, Jim Rogers, on the healthcare side of the house. He's done a lot of work with government subsidies on that side of the house, and we can get into that at another time. But, really understands that whole subsidy side of the house and how you gotta match up private funding with public funding and how is that gonna work. And so now, flash forward a few years and unfortunate incidents of COVID, and there are billions of dollars coming in broadband all of a sudden. So, our work, we work with communities, we work with counties, we work with, in some case, working with the state of Rhode Island and doing some mapping down there as well. But really what we do is we start out, you guys have done some of this work, but, start with a survey, start at the ground level, try to understand how public meetings, see where the town or the community is at from a broadband perspective. Do they have it? If they have it, do they like it? Really what we come down to is it available, number one, and if it's available, is it adequate? And Susan just mentioned it, and even if it's available and adequate, is it affordable, right? And is it getting used? Do people know how to use it? So you got to pull all of those things together to understand what's the broadband landscape in a community. You guys have already started that work, which is helpful. We carry that through. You guys that are in the middle, or go up for request anyway, just pricing, and it's not just pricing, it's design, what are they willing to do, what's this partner look like, they're already on the polls, what's the cost, what's the technology going to look like, what's the technology today, what's the technology in 1 to 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, how does that all look, how does that fit into your vision of broadband, right? We really have to work with the community because everybody defines broadband a little bit differently. It's the traditional FCC 25/3. Connect Maine changed, their look at it as 50/10 last year. The monies, I'll say, that's coming out from ARP and then Treasury, and as Susan said, infrastructure, they're looking at 100/20 and 100/100. So obviously that you have to take into account when you start thinking about grant funding that Bill mentioned. What do you have on the ground today? What can we improve? Is on the ground or disprove, I should say, from our clients. Get to the RFP stage, successful from an RFP and financial, okay, how is it going to work? Certainly communication. I think Susan would say this probably louder than I will. The whole time you're doing this, you've got to bring the community with you, and you have to bring the council, select board with you. It's a long process. Even select board people change. And we've been in some communities where originally you start out, it's, oh my gosh, we need broadband. It's a 4-0 vote if there's 4 people on the council, a 5-0 vote. And next year the council changes and it's a 3-2 vote. You don't have the buy-off that you had before. And it's important to keep that communication going from the council level and from the community level. Because as you said, financially, eventually, it's probably going to come to some type of vote. Any grant application is going to have some type of matching to go along with it. And certain towns don't have a lot of that money, so they might have to do, I'll call it bank borrowed steel, however we want to do it. But look at it from revenue bonds and all those fun things that happen. So you really got to bring everybody along with it. It's just not about the broadband community, the smart people that say, oh, I understand technology. It's who else doesn't understand technology? What does telehealth even mean to somebody? Education at home. So community effort, to say the least. Get through, that piece of it, feasibility, understanding that it's a doable, and whether that's a public-private partnership, again, somebody that might be on the pole, somebody that's close by, somebody that, do a different technology, and really vet that against where do you want to be, right? Where do you want to be today? What are you trying to solve? And where do you want to be in 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years? Those are all different questions that really need to be asked. And so we really just kind of bring that through. If you choose a provider, we're more than happy to stick around, help with negotiations, depending on the build itself. We can help represent the town as I'll call it an adjunct staff, right? So we understand networks, we understand broadband. Towns don't necessarily understand that. So we'll work with you, kind of through the build-up process. Polls, the way it's supposed to go on the polls, equipment being ordered, it's what's the time frame, what's the money that you're putting out, is that what we spend it on? A variety of things that we can help from the project management perspective, just making sure it stays on track with a selected vendor. And then afterwards, again, if you own a piece of the network that's an asset, it's got to be maintained, or it has to be at least from, I'll say, council perspective, from a town perspective, right? You have tax money involved. So we can stick around and play kind of an adjunct staff from an operational standpoint. We just represent you to the network, to the operator. Say, okay, is it being operated the way it's supposed to be done? KPIs, service level agreements, all those things that when you run network, you got to technically towns necessarily are experts on that. We don't spend a lot of time, through the course of a month, because you have an operator and you just expect them to run, but we check in. As an overview of the, representing the town. So anywhere from soup to nuts, we can stick our work in wherever it fits best. Been talking to Bill a little bit, and so you guys have done some of this upfront work, and now let's look at proposals, right? Let's look at the technology, and does it match what you guys have thought? What's the cost associated to it? Right? How do we start to put cost, and take rates, and potential grants, and ARP money that you guys are going to put into it? Wherever all that comes together, just put all those pieces together. So here's a general idea of what it's going to cost, is a general idea of where you may go look for funding, and see how that turns out for the town of Mount Vernon. In a quick nutshell, that's what we do. Kind of everything from soup to nuts, and just kind of keep it going and keep the project on the rails.
So John, one thing that I'm kind of curious about, some towns invest or they own, fiber or whatever they put on the poles, right? And other towns really don't want to own any of that stuff. And I think we're feeling like we'd like to be in that category, but I'm not speaking for anybody other than myself, I think, when I say that, but maybe I am, maybe I am. I'm not. But in any case, what are you seeing with other towns grappling with that type of question? In other words, we know that there's going to need to be public money of some sort to get a broadband provider or providers to finish getting this town connected. But I can't imagine there's a lot of towns that want to have a municipal-owned broadband system. But what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so certainly a mix, to say the least, Paul. And you're right, towns don't know how to operate, nor do they want to operate networks, right? That's why they hire folks that can do that. And typically, you hire you have kind of the construction piece of it, you have design, what are you really going to put out there, construction, and then operator, and then ISP, really. So obviously Mount Vernon is a little bit smaller, so even if you had an open network, there might not be 4 or 5 ISPs jumping at the door ready to sign everybody up because it's on the take rate. But one of the challenges is when you get into the bonds, right? So if you own an asset, right, or I'm sorry, you're taking out a bond, you have to have an asset. So that asset is, if you will, that fiber on the pole is, so then you own an asset. Now, how does that look, and who represents that, and who takes care of it, is where you get in kind of the operator side of it, the operator arrangement. And yes, you can, certainly get some grant money and maybe some other town funding money. If you're not going to the bond market, then you don't necessarily have to own the asset. You can give that, money strictly to some service provider who can take care of everything, right? You're just helping them do a private investment almost, if you will, that says, here, we need it, we're gonna give you the money, we're gonna find the money, we're gonna give it to you. It's all yours in the end. You just need to work it, contractually work it. Yeah.
Interesting. So theoretically, a town could overwire the whole community with fiber, own that fiber asset,
Mhm.
and then could you literally lease it or let multiple providers have access to it? So in other words, we own all the fiber on the pole, but GWI can come in, whoever, I don't want to name names, but different companies can come in and offer service on it.
Yeah, if you own the asset, right, it's termed an open access network. So, I mean, there's more to it than what we're talking about. You own the asset all the way, if you will, you can only work in one town. They own the asset and put the drops in all the way to the house, right? So the subscriber doesn't necessarily have to buy the service, but the asset is owned all the way from the central office to the side of the house. And then whoever's in that house wants to turn up service, they turn up service. If they don't, they don't.
Have you ever seen it with multiple providers that can run on those wires?
We have not done that. There is that out there. We haven't specifically looked at that. It's you get into poly, understand this, you get into layer 2, layer 3, how do you want to hand it off, right? Because from an operator perspective, you don't want a lot of people inside your fiber network, right? So you want an operator that's going out, hanging the drop, doing it, one person doing that, you don't want all kinds of people splicing fiber on your network. But in the end, you can hand off a layer 2 or layer 3 connection. Anybody would, put a roller on the other side of it, turn it up.
Right. I'm looking around the room to see who
We're just,
might have
we're just seeing if
questions.
there's-
John, are you working with any towns right now around the Mount Vernon area?
China.
China?
Try to find something. They're a little bit unique because they've got a lot of coverage, and some really bad coverage. And so they're challenged when it comes to trying to figure out, how to get funding for one. Challenge of building speed tests, so push the speed test, push the speed test, push the speed test.
Yeah.
That's what we will say. Because I looked at your speed test earlier today. There's certainly, it's a conversation, and part of that gets into affordability, right? So you maybe have some good internet, but it's not affordable. So what's that conversation?
Yeah. So are you doing a similar engagement with China that you're proposing?
Yeah, we went down the road with them, tried to get the select the we actually had a call last year that failed. They picked a provider, trying to get the provider in there to build a network. And, again, the town had one the asset, but they weren't operating it. Somebody else was going to construct it and operate it. The typical one. But the town wouldn't vote for it. I would say we didn't get ahead of that one. From our standpoint, working with the town and working with the broadband committee, we did not get ahead of that conversation.
Yeah.
Sure, in that case.
So what is your expertise with grant funding? I'd like to think if we signed a deal with you guys, that you'd pay for yourself with grant funding. I don't mean in the contract, but I'm just wondering what your past experience has been.
That's a trickier question. So not all grants will pay for our work. How's that?
No, I don't mean literally to pay for your work, but in other words,
Save
by
us enough.
engaging professionals. 'Cause our broadband committee happens to be awesome to get this over the finish line, if you will. We need some professional expertise in pulling it all together and evaluating proposals and all that. But I think figuring out where to go for grants, writing the grants, and all that is another big area of opportunity for consultancy. So,
Sure.
talk to us more about grants.
Yeah, so you know, Connect Maine, right, because traditionally had not enough money to even run, support people, if you run it on 1 or 2 people, less than $1 million for a lot of years, we as taxpayers gave a little bit of boost to that. We passed the last fall for 15 million, which is much better. So now they can actually start to make a difference. And then, then you have the 100 million plus that's coming from Treasury, and then you got 100 million plus coming from infrastructure. Treasury, we know the numbers for 126. Infrastructure, we don't know the final number because it's going to come based on a multiplier, which has to do with mapping. But in a quick nutshell, you can say there's certainly a couple $100 million coming from the state of Maine over the next year. State of Maine also created the Maine Connectivity Authority, because they knew this large money was coming. And so now, I think what we're waiting on, Susan can correct me, but she has to be careful. I think what we're waiting on is, what's that going to look like? Will they use the similar program, which is Connect Maine Authority, and just say, okay, we'll run the process, let's continue using that process with this money that we have. It's working. That can make sense, but I can't say because we haven't heard for that. That is
I can jump
Okay,
in.
thanks.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I work on the Public Connection Authority. And so the Connection Authority is in the process of working with a memorandum of understanding between Connect Maine Authority and the Maine Connectivity Authority. Connect Maine has spent the last couple of years of updating its whole grant application, understanding where there's unserved homes across the state. And so at least for the first rounds of funds and money that comes out, the Connect Maine and Maine Connectivity Authority will be working hand in hand. So you can pretty much expect the same application process. The first round of funds that are coming in, there's a grant round that they just released.
Yeah.
It was Maine Connectivity authorized $1 million to go over to Connect Maine to manage the grant process. So I think we can expect that's the process at least for the next several months. It may change after that, but I think that's what we're going to see going forward.
So I got a question that
good news.
that maybe John or Susan could answer. Mount Vernon has broadband coverage of what, 65%, Bill?
Sunday.
Yep, about 2/3.
2/3. So whereas Vienna has 0%, for example. I think there's some concern that the 0%.
So, yeah, and so to answer, kind of keep going on the grant, right? We don't know the final rules, is what I can say about, how the grants are coming. I was on a call with Treasury last week, I'll say, with one of the special interest groups called Shelby. And he was very clear that, the Treasury money is our money. It's based on COVID. It's designed to be real quick. Let's do it. And they don't have a lot of rules around it besides 100 over 100. And according to them, I haven't researched this yet with our with our authority. They are less concerned about an overbid. Right. So where money was spent already at 25.3 federal money, we're talking, they're less concerned about that. So I don't know how the rules are going to come out that are going to match that say, okay, 25.3 is underserved or least served, then you have 50 over 10, and then you have 100 over 20, you're still underserved. That makes a big difference, right? When you say you're not covered, VM is even less covered. It's going to come down to some of those rules, Paul, actually.
Well, we're not covered if it's 100 over 100, so that could be
Yeah.
good. Bill,
If I can clarify, if our town has coverage, what we're saying is 2/3 of them have cable TV connections. And I think, and John, if I'm listening carefully enough or understanding carefully, I think what you're saying is that it's not entirely clear that having cable access to cable, coaxial cable-based internet is necessarily going to qualify somebody as having service being served by internet because of upload speeds, for example.
Right, no, currently, Connect Maine is looking at 50/10, right, that was their definition of vote on last year. I want to say this was in 2020, 2021, yeah. So that would be considered, served, and cables,
Right.
gig or 100/20 or 35, right? So cables limitation is a technology, 35 up. So that's, when the ARP came out, when you look at the ARP rules currently, they want to build the 100/100, but they're willing to accept 100/20, which would be your, cable influence and all of that. But it needs to be scalable to 100. Those are the current few that spend ARP money.
I think if you put in for the grant, the first ones that put in for the grant are the ones that are gonna get it, I would think.
So do you think, John, so to Bob's point, the sooner we put in for a grant, maybe the better it will be, you think?
I'm gonna say not necessarily. So here's the challenge right now. There's a Connect Maine grant open January 12th, and closes March 20th. Right, so obviously you're not ready for that.
Right.
Because there's a lot more that has to be done to get ready for that. I'm gonna guess, and I don't know the numbers, I don't know if they're doing 15 million this round, probably 15 million. And they're gonna get a whole lot of cost. I'm gonna guess, if we're giving away 15, they're gonna get 25 to $40 million worth of requests. That's just the nature of the beast, everybody's excited it's coming. And that's not to say that the next rounds won't help, right? So I think what I coach people on right now is we used to say, hey, you want to be construction ready? Well, what you want right now is to be grant ready.
Yep.
And so the best work that we can do, some of the work we need to do right now is to open up those grants, right? And we're working with a couple of folks now, so we'll understand a little bit better. Because this grant, the grant process that Connect Maine is doing is brand new. They haven't done this process before. It's more automated. It's you're online. You're doing metro maps. You're doing a very, I'll say, large, complex spreadsheet, but a lot of data has to go into it. So, and so the reason I say you want to be grant ready, that's that work that we're talking about. It's the community work. It's the RFP, understanding the technology, because in the end, when you fill out this grant application, at least Connect Maine is that there needs to be a design and a cost and a bill of material and what's all of this going to cost. So that's the path you guys are going down right now. Understand what needs to be in a grant, because and then to talk about, that's Connect Maine, and that's certainly literally in your backyard. And that's one. And then you have folks like Northern Border, you have folks like EPA, you have USDA, you've got a variety of these federal programs that are all getting money. They all get consistent income. Now they're getting additional money. So we just need to make sure that we're always keeping an eye on what grant funding is an opportunity, and when's the windows that are open, and what do they need for information. And that's why we need all of this data together. We call it up front.
Okay, that makes sense. So that in and of itself is a big part of what your group can help us with.
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it. All right, any other questions?
Sorry. Phil, did you have some questions?
Well, just one thing. You had mentioned KPIs, which I believe is key performance indicators.
Yes.
And I wanted to let the select board know that one of the elements of this whole process is that the town is involved in buying internet in some form or fashion, as opposed to up until now, it's been individual consumers. And individual consumers look at key performance indicators like, do I get internet, and how much does it cost, and how's the customer service? What are some of the KPIs that you would expect whoever's responsible for oversight of the result of this process? What would they be looking at on behalf of all the consumers?
So if you're going after your operator, is really what you start to look at the customer service side of it and the troubleshooting, right? So you want to see, okay, how quickly is the call answered? Where is the call center? How quickly is the call answered? How quick is resolution? How quick are install? Or say quick. What's the timeline on installs? What's the timeline on troubles and repairs? all those things that go into customer service, if you will. From installation to a maintenance to a repair time, right? So any of those little values that you can think of that go into taking care of a customer. That's what we say is key performance indicators. And then you have SLAs, which is service level agreements. What's the uptime of the network, right? So I've got a backbone network that goes back to equipment. Well, what's the uptime on that equipment? What happens when the power goes out? Is it active stuff or is it passive? If it's active, we need to make sure that it's some version of uptime on the battery and the generator. Then you get into the central office, and what's the uptime of that central office and the equipment that's in there, and then you've got the upstream from there. Okay, how many upstreams are coming out of the central office, and is it redundant? Who am I working with on that side? Is everybody, a lot of people go down to Portland, who bypasses Portland and goes right to Boston, or goes out to New York, or whatever. What's the upstream? So those are your service level agreements, and then your KPIs are kind of closer to home, the actual customer service.
Any other questions here for you guys?
I don't think so.
So from a process perspective, Bill, I think you were wondering this. We have various things we're talking about relating to ARPA funding. We're not going to immediately vote on either one of these proposals because we have to look at some either. I don't know if we'll do that tonight or if we kick it. But we're going to talk about a bridge project, and then the thing we're going to check in on, it's not on the official agenda, but Bob has requested that we talk about it, is just to make sure that this board has the authority that we need to allocate this money. So we could skip to that topic now if you want. Doesn't matter to me. We'll talk about it one way or another.
Yeah,
So,
if they're done.
yeah.
So,
I don't want to scare them.
No, we don't want to scare you guys. So Bill, don't worry, we'll figure it out. So,
Paul, in my spreadsheet, over the last month, the select board has approved monies
Yeah.
for us for the grant activity, and we have $3,550 left that we haven't spent. For one thing, we were going to hire a consultant to do some pro forma financial analysis, and we wound up doing that ourselves. We were going to spend some money on an RFP process, and we were excluded from that because we did not spend $40,000 like all the other towns around us to do a whole survey. And it turns out that we were still able to get the same 4 vendors to provide basically the same proposals without spending that $45,000. So I'd like the select board to take that into consideration and perhaps approve the digital, not that one's more important than the other, they're both priorities, but we do have previously approved dollars that we could use to pay this digital equity engagement, and I would strongly
He already has
at least
that.
a tenth of the group as to.
Right, digital equity is already set. We've already voted on that.
so Bob, what
Right.
was that?
Digital equity, we've already voted the 2,500.
Yeah, I think we just delayed it because we hadn't had a chance to
Oh,
look
okay.
at the pitch. We
What
wanted
about
to hear-
Mission Broadband? How much do they need for that?
Oh, yeah, so what's the bottom line on the initial engagement with John's group?
So we got it, when we looked at it on a project basis, it came to 14,000 and change. And based on our discussions among ourselves on the committee and with John, we thought we would ask for a not to exceed amount of $15,000. In other words, the agreement would require that they would not incur any fees beyond that point for the services we require without our written approval in advance. And we think that would give us enough to get the evaluation of the proposals that we have in hand. And it would get us a very good start on getting grant ready, if not submitting a grant. We don't really know when the next window is. And we're not sure, we know infrastructure grants are the big ones, but there are other grants out there for development and other activities is not to pin ourselves down with specific tasks, but rather to come up with an amount that we thought was reasonable and try to get your approval for that. Does that sound good? That's what you and I spoke about, John?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so,
And just one caveat, I don't think we said it, let us clarify. So there's a bunch of stuff, there's a bunch of, I'll say, tasks, if you will, within the selection and the request for proposal and maybe grant, but with what Bill and I talked about, is we would present, hey, you know what, here's a level of effort, so many hours, and then he'll approve that every time. So it's not like we're just gonna go spend up, it's every piece beyond what the committee's gonna approve.
question for the treasurer. On the ARPA line on the budget, it still says 0%. I thought we got into that money
I
a little
thought so too.
Oh,
ARPA.
right,
broad-
but that was for the broadband, and I thought we'd just do it as they submitted the bills.
Right, that's true, but based on what we've already approved, we must be over 0% into ARPA.
Okay, I haven't moved it because I haven't seen any bills. So
Oh,
it
I
was-
see.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotcha.
Right.
So
Sorry.
what's the approximate amount? Because the broadband committee had some money to start with, so we didn't start in with ARPA money initially.
The only bill is
Right,
that,
I haven't,
mailing, right?
yeah, so that's we approved up to 1,600, but I think the bill that Chuck was submitted today was 1,200.
Right.
1,200.
Okay, all right, well, either way, we're not far into it, so that's
Yeah.
fine. The next topic, the,
Right.
$50,000
And-
line item.
And Bill, one thing we got to keep in mind is the opera funds, the treasury is going to be watching those funds really closely. We got caught on
FEMA.
FEMA, and we had to go back many years to trace these funds. So we're going to have to watch all these bills real carefully and keep our nose right to the grindstone on these, because these are going to come back and bother us if we
So,
don't.
so Bob's talking about our past history with the federal government.
Yeah.
Where they said, here's all this money, go ahead and spend it. Then later, they're like, how the hell did you spend that? Did you prove it?
Give me the cancel checks, the exact
Yeah.
authorized.
MMA has already warned us that we got to be very careful.
Okay,
with
so let's
these.
talk about that for a second.
Okay.
So what was the MMA's?
Yeah. What I went Title 30A, which is a elections web class that MMA put on, and their attorney that gave this was Richard Fuelling, who has been there forever, like 100 years. And one thing he brought up at that was the opera funds need to be voted on by the town legislative body. Now, the reason why he said that is, and he did bring up the fact that we voted, what was that? We voted at the town meeting to accept funds, that Article 15 that you talked about.
Yeah.
But
And to expend.
those last few words on that article, like you said, is exactly correct. As those funds that come in from federal and state and things like grants,
Right,
as they were
intended,
intended.
right.
These funds for ARPA are not intended for anything. They're not specific.
They're guidelines.
That's right. They give us a whole barrel of stuff
Well,
we can
yeah,
pick
But
from.
my contention, so you guys, just so you guys know, we wrote an article for the last town meeting warrant that kind of covered being able to accept funds and give this board the authority to spend funds for the purpose for which they were intended.
Correct.
That was the words we used. So the initial ARPA information was that it was to be used for infrastructure and broadband. So from my perspective, this board can allocate money in support of the broadband effort.
It can be used to pay salaries. It can be used to a whole host of things. It can
But
pay.
it specifically lists broadband.
It does. It
Yeah.
does roads.
I'm satisfied.
It does a lot of things. We can pay for a lot of different things. We can pay for owl.
Like this bridge thing that we're about. to talk
Right,
about.
but we could buy owl with it.
Yeah.
We can pay rescue, firemen,
Right.
a whole bunch of things. So what
So you're saying
MMA
that-
is saying is the legislative body must tell us how to spend these funds. And the Treasury is going to be looking at that.
So Bob, you're concerned that without another town meeting vote with a more specific expenditure,
Right.
Down the road, the federal government will.
Is going to
Can
say,
I-
how did you get the authority to spend those funds?
I
Can
don't
I
think they're
step
gonna
in?
ask that. I think what they're gonna say is, we gave you the money, you spent it, just show us how you spent it. I don't think they're gonna care about.
I think where
How
MMA
this
is
works,
coming
so.
from is that because it's not a $10,000 grant for PPE, it's a very large amount of money
Right.
Yeah.
based on the town.
Right.
And that the townspeople really should have some say in how it's spent.
Right.
Right.
I think that's.
Which
where
will
it's
be
getting.
easily done. We can do a special town meeting, which you don't like, I don't like.
Yeah, you know, like,
We can do it at the next town, selectmen's meeting.
that's true.
You have to advertise it.
Yeah,
How
7
far ahead?
days.
7 days.
It's only
Okay.
a week or 10 days, a week.
I thought it was 10
I think
days.
it might be 10 days, but that's fine.
Right. And we can put the bridge, we can put broadband, we can put the owl,
Yeah,
anything you want to do.
Just because it's such a large amount of money, the auditors also question that. In that.
Yeah,
when-
the auditor is going to come after us, for
Yeah.
sure.
When it's one thing to, like I said, these little tiny grants, like we got the PPE
Right.
grant and
Right.
we have the AARP grant, which is very specific that Aging in Place got.
right.
But when you talk about this kind of money,
Yeah, $200,000 or
That-
close to it.
Right.
that's like a huge portion of our budget. So-
I would feel a lot more
So,
comfortable.
This was from the seminar you went to. Maybe what we should do as a follow-up is, we'll email MMA legal directly.
I did. That's what I sent to you.
Oh, okay,
I sent you a copy. You should have gotten
Yeah.
it. Did you get it?
yeah.
This came from Garrett Corbin.
Okay, all right, all right.
So I've got two opinions. I got one from Richard
Okay,
and I got one from Corbin.
all right, that's right.
And
Yeah, you
I
said
will
that.
tell you, I can back this up based on what the auditors are talking to me about.
Okay. All right, so that's fine. So don't worry, guys. We'll figure this out.
Even though we spent some already.
Yes.
I think.
All right, any other questions, while we have Susan and, John? Otherwise, we need to move on to the next
Utilize some
topic.
of this detective Diana.
All right,
What's
you
that?
guys are very welcome to
Did I
stay
send
with
you a
us,
copy
but
of
we're
this?
gonna
Diana?
move
I
on
don't
on the
think
agenda.
so.
Thank you both so
The
much.
one
Thank
you
you
did,
for
I'll send it to you.
because they're in the same position, and thank you,
All
because I
right,
really
so-
have been worried about
I
that.
just have a clarification of what just happened on the warrant.
I thought I had
Is
another
the
copy.
essence of what was just
I'll email
discussed at the warrant that was approved at the last town meeting
In fact,
not sufficient?
yeah, I'll email it.
That's what Bob's saying, yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean we can't have a special town meeting.
Don't worry, we'll do it.
I-
You agree?
Thanks,
Next
guys.
time.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, John.
All right, so Wentworth Partners Bridge, you guys, did you have a chance to take a look at that? I do have a
Forwarded
printed
that
copy of
along, huh?
it. Let's see.
That's just the engineering.
So this is the company that would like to do the engineering work for us on that bridge. The critical thing here is time.
Yes.
If we don't get it engineered, it's not gonna be built this year.
Right.
I can't.
I almost don't think it'll be, I think we're pushing it if
Well,
it
we're
can.
pushing it, yeah. We are pushing it, but, yeah.
I would go as quickly as I can.
Well, I mean, there is a signature page.
Yeah.
So
You-
based on what
you
you
want a
just
motion?
said,
It's
where,
gotta be ARPA money though.
yeah,
want a
based,
motion?
based on what you just said, you've limited where we can take that from.
I'm fine with finding it.
I-
Using ARPA money either way.
I would too, because I can't imagine the special town meeting voting against it.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's tricky though to say
Want to wait till next
we're
time?
having a special town meeting for
Let's-
one thing and not
let's-
the other thing.
yeah,
It's
let's
all
wait.
part of the same thing.
Why don't we wait till next town meeting then? 2 weeks.
Thank you for doing what you did. Thank you, Anna. I agree with you.
We can wait till next town meeting.
All right.
Next.
Okay,
So
so
Did you guys have a
next,
chance to quickly review it anyway?
Yeah.
yeah, I think it looks,
Was there
I
any
think it looks
questions?
Yeah.
okay.
It's excellent, I think.
Okay, good enough then.
Um,
So.
And what I would do is I would send that to Livermore. What's the name of that? Main Line? It was that Main Line that you also contacted, but they said they do culverts.
Oh, no, yeah, so.
If you send it to
those guys
them-
would be after the engineering work is done.
Right. Oh,
Then-
send it to
then-
them.
No.
Yeah, see, we're not in a position to be able to bid the
Right,
job
that'll
out.
cover
We
our,
gotta have the engineering work
Right.
done. Once that work is done, and we don't have the expertise to even do an RFP for
Right.
engineering work, so these guys have already won our trust, I guess,
so if you send it to them after that, they'll cover
Exactly.
us.
So the result of their work will then be able to bid the bridge out. Simple as that. All right,
Good.
so we'll table that temporarily. Who's on my call anymore?
Oh, they all left.
They all left. Okay. Anything on Trio noteworthy?
Trio, they've generated a ticket which allows us to, they've contacted, what's his name? Our IT guy,
Oh, yeah, Nate.
Nate,
Nate.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be downloading.
I think he's got everything ready to go.
Okay.
We just.
When
need
can you do
training.
training? Mondays mornings, Wednesday mornings?
Mondays and Wednesdays.
Monday.
I cannot do Tuesday,
Just Monday and Wednesdays.
and I can do Fridays if necessary.
Okay,
All right. So
I will get to them on that. So things are close.
Okay, awesome. Audit.
Audit. It should be
Sounds like
moving
we're in
on.
good shape.
Moving along.
I'm yeah, waiting for the next shoe to fall,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I haven't. Yeah.
What's your, do you think that they've already asked you for everything that they need, or they got the bulk and then they'll come back and?
I believe they've gotten the bulk, and I wouldn't be surprised if they come
Yeah,
back for
yeah.
certain follow-ups. The one
And
thing,
have they given us an estimate, maybe it's in my email, but you know, offhand, if there's an estimate on,
ETA,
yeah,
no, but I should be. I will talk
yeah,
to.
you think we'll get it by sometime in April? Okay. I just don't want us to be holding up the town report for it. So,
Okay, I will. Ruggles,
I mean,
Samantha Ruggles.
I would just soon tell them we have to have it by end of April, you know, as you talk to them.
Okay.
Because we really have to get the town report pulled together by early May. You know.
Yep.
Technically can slip into the second week of May, but end of April is really the deadline. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good enough. Budget, I got the whole email written, I gotta send that out.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you were such a.
No, Alice, you sent one out, didn't you? To get budget information from the
Well,
departments?
I've written the whole thing, I don't think I gave it to Alan.
No, I
Oh, you
sent
did?
out a request
Yeah.
to each of the committees for their reports.
Okay,
Oh,
well, Alice,
oh.
I'll send you the email that I've already drafted, and you can
Okay.
send it out to them. How about
Oh,
that?
okay, okay,
Yeah. Just to add to it.
all right.
Good enough.
As you get anything, if you send them to me, I'll put them in that spread.
And,
Budget
you know,
thing.
the bottom line, Alice, is most of them just need to give us the spreadsheet. And then once we see it, we'll know whether we need to, you know, further delve into it or whatever. But I think that we should be expecting some costs to rise. Human resources cost more. services cost more, so we're gonna have to see. I don't think it's gonna be a flat year. I mean, Mac was saying that a year ago about this year, but I.
Lee was getting truckloads of surface gravel today. He's expecting road problems as soon as the mud goes out.
Road problems. Gonna be an interesting
I
spring.
expect them to.
All right.
I got stuck in Vienna townhouse
Oh,
Yeah,
last
so
week.
a couple other things that I have, Kennebec County, so it's been noted
Yeah.
that several other counties have taken federal funds and allowed them to be used within the county for
Yeah.
broadband. So far, Kennebec County hasn't, so I'm gonna give Nancy Ryan, she's our representative, on the, county committee, on the, the county
Commissioners.
commissioner, a call, if that
Mhm.
whatever, just to see if there's been any thought about that, but have you guys heard anything about Kennebec County
Nope.
talking about?
Actually, as
money for
far as
broadband?
Kennebec County Commissioners is housed in Maine Farm Bureau, so I kind of
Okay,
had a little bit of overheard things. And basically, the broadband isn't as much of an issue in Kennebec County as some of the
Right.
other counties.
I'm sure that's true, actually.
So I think that's one of the biggest reasons that they
Yeah.
haven't sent anything. So maybe we need to make some noise.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe we just need a list of what their current priorities are,
Mhm.
I mean, there's other priorities in the county as well,
Yeah.
sheriff, jail, et cetera, so I'll find out though. FEMA money, I just wanted to note that due to Carrie's
Poor Carrie.
hard work, we think we're out of the woods with their audit.
We're on the trail to get out of the woods. We found the trail again.
Okay.
And what they have done is I convinced them, first of all, they thought we were really out to lunch because of the numbers that I submitted. And there was a real disconnect in their understanding of FICA versus small towns. And so now that they understand where I got the numbers, they're going back and they're coming back to me with a list of, kind of like the auditors, a list of test invoices that they want me to prove out the train of payment of the invoice. So,
Yeah.
and we came out with a way for me to do that without paying the bank to pull up all
Yeah.
canceled checks. So,
We're not celebrating yet, but we're getting close to it.
right.
Good
The
job,
next-
Kate.
The next one is the Aging in Place Committee. They've now identified that the John T. Gorman Foundation has some grant funding available. So Tom Ward requested that we offer the same exact letter that we authored to the Maine Community Foundation.
Mm.
So what I've done is taken that same letter, and I'm gonna give Alice a copy of both, changed the word to John T. Gorman Foundation,
Oh.
signed it.
Sure.
Lovely.
And so what it says, Alice, you don't have to write this down, I'm giving you a copy of the letter. To the John T. Gorman Foundation, Town of Mount Vernon agrees to accept grant funds from the John T. Gorman Foundation in support of the respite/adult day program run by the Town Aging in Place Committee, specifically to cover the cost of meals and refreshments served to participants and volunteers. So I would entertain a motion that I sign this.
Motion, I will gladly motion that Paul signs this letter to the John T. Gorman Foundation.
Second.
All in favor? All right. So Alice, I'm gonna actually send the PDF of this to Tom, but I'm gonna give you these two, and if you want the PDF, Alice, I can send them as well, but we need to keep these on file. The other one was done last meeting when you were out. Nancy Hemphill, some of you guys know, is a summer resident of Flying Pond. She fixed up the sign, the Welcome to Mount Vernon sign near the Flying Pond Variety last year.
Oh, she was one.
Yeah, did a great job. She has noticed how pathetic the one on the North Road is heading into town for Reedfield.
It is very
And has
much.
volunteered to also work on it, but it's really too far gone apparently. Now, since she emailed me, I haven't had a chance to run over there and look at it, but apparently it's dilapidated. So I just wanted to note that she's willing to do something, but I think we might have to, if it's something that we want to
Is it
maintain, we might have
plywood
to.
or what?
I don't know what it is. I think it's probably a pressure treated post that, I don't know if it's plywood or what, but, so any of us that might traverse the North
Yeah, I
Road,
can't
get a
remember.
chance to stop and look at that sign. it's right past Robin and Bo's
Yep.
place, you know, a little bit beyond that.
I'll see. I'm not sure when I'm going by there, but I'll
Yeah,
look.
I just wanted to mention it, and I'll get back to Nancy later.
What is her last name?
Hemphill, yeah, she was the
Okay.
one that did the other side.
Okay.
I know her, and I sit on another board with her, so I'll let her know we're looking at it, but I think she's saying it might need some major work or a full I don't know.
It does.
Or maybe it just needs new code, so just, I don't know, we'll see. We talked during the budget session about Verizon line cancellation. I made a note, so what do I need to do there again, Gary?
I need to get you a bill so you can talk to them
Okay, yeah.
because
if you
I
could
wasn't a
scan a bill and
recognized
send it to
person.
me, that would be great. I used to be able to log in and do it, but
But I had
you
to
didn't
change
know
it
that I
because
had that,
Carol
so you
was
changed
locked
the
out.
password.
Yeah.
All right, good enough.
And that
Oh.
took quite a bit of doing.
Yeah. Oh, and if residents don't know, this is the end of, this is a good one for the minute though. This is the end of Maine Unclaimed Property Week. And guess what? There's over $25 in my name.
Really?
It's from an insurance company, but listen,
Oh,
how can an insurance company not know where I've been? I've been at the same address
I
for
know.
26 years. Why would I have to ask this?
We all know where you are.
But anyways, for anybody that doesn't know about it, there is this so-called unclaimed property list where if money is owed somebody, the state gets it and if you don't ask for it, the state keeps it.
so do you have a link to that or?
Yes,
Yep.
it is maineunclaimedproperty.gov. All one word, maineunclaimedproperty.gov.
And once again, it's so much easier for men to claim because if they didn't change their name in marriage and get divorced, they have a far easier chance of claiming property from
Yeah.
there than otherwise.
I think that's all I had. What about you guys? Before we get to the executive session.
Quick announcement to anyone listening on March 10th at 6:30 on Zoom. There is a meeting that the Seven Lakes Alliance is hosting to talk about the Long Pond Action Plan. So this will be for the next 10 years for the watershed to protect water quality.
March 10th.
Maybe you should get that link to Alice. She could put it right there.
Yes, I sent her a
I,
thing
I've
for the
already got
newsletter.
it on the newsletter.
Awesome, good.
I heard from the Shred It people. They were called to see if we had anything to shred. And I said, well, we got an appointment, haven't done it with you guys in January.
Yeah.
And I guess there's been a change of people, so they're trying to get that on.
So we have a pile now for sure.
We've had it since December.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do they know when they're coming?
Did you go through the?
They didn't come out when they were
No.
supposed to?
No.
They just didn't show.
They never showed up. So,
Oh,
yeah. So
I
we've
saw
got
their
25 boxes.
head by, I saw some shred company head
Oh,
by
yeah.
my house last week. They must have been heading.
Yeah, I've seen them several times.
Yeah, well, they're gonna get out here as soon as possible.
Okay, good enough though. Bob, you got anything?
Charlie is okay for another year, no cancer. For mowing.
You don't have to write that last part for the minute.
Yeah, I don't have to write
Who's that?
cancer.
Who's
Uh,
Charlie?
Charlie will work again this year mowing.
Charlie Mead is gonna keep mowing, that's the good
Oh,
news.
Charlie Mead.
Yeah.
Okay,
The ballot box needs to be repaired.
right.
I'm gonna take a look at it.
Okay, it's at the.
I think it just
community
needs a
center.
slide. I'll look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah, thank you,
Oh,
Bob.
and-
Oh, the key for the community center, did you bring
Oh,
it back
yeah.
up here?
I do have it.
Yeah.
I'd actually put it on a ring that said community center.
I'll need it to get in there, so if you
Okay.
put it up here sometime,
Okay.
I'll get in
Yeah,
and get
Dr.
that.
Onion was also, he was asking about if we want him to renew.
Who?
Dr. Onion, it doesn't come, his term doesn't end until June 30th, but he's already asking if we,
Yes, we'd love
Yes.
to have
Right.
it. Speaking of Dr. Elliott, so yes,
yeah,
tell him yes.
he said he didn't mind if you
I
want
emailed him
somebody
today
younger.
because I just
Yeah,
read that
I saw
Henry County was lowered a level in whole COVID transmission rate thing.
I like it, his answer.
Because I was assuming that he'd want us to wear masks the rest of our lives. But in any case, he advised us to hold off just a little bit longer until, what did he say?
The Ides of March.
After school vacation.
No,
Yeah,
the Ides
see-
of
see
March.
this-
I wanna-
Yes, the Ides of March.
Right, so we'll wait, we might be able to talk about it at the next meeting, lifting our mask
Mike,
All right.
mandate here.
So when should I prepare that? Do you want to wait until June? Since
Well, we can reappoint him at
We
any
can-
point in
okay.
time.
while we're thinking of it.
Yeah, I mean, while you're thinking about it.
All right, I almost was able.
I'll
to
nominate you right now.
Yes, give me some info.
I'll still have the paperwork for that. So that'll be fine. All right, anything else before we entertain?
Charlie. Oh, yeah, the dump. In front of the recycling shed, there's a section there as you're leaving that gets real rutted. It's
Oh my
really
God.
rutted now.
It's bad, yeah.
Can we ask Lee to fix that?
We can.
But I don't know how to pay for it.
Well, we've always had a little extra money in the transfer station budget. It's not looking quite as flush this year though.
No,
So it's gonna be close this year.
Megan's been doing a lot of work out there.
But, we got a little taste of mud season and depends on how quick the. frost goes
She
out.
said she tried to drive through it and it was just really bad.
Oh, it was terrible.
So she marked it all off so no one can get in there.
Right.
yeah, that's like a turn your ankle kind of
Yeah.
rut when
Yeah,
it
no, it was
freezes
bad.
up.
So I think we're just gonna have to see, but either way, if it's dangerous, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if we have a budget or not, we're
Yeah.
gonna have to fix it.
Yeah.
So,
Those are the things that I can,
We
It's
to tell Lee
dangerous.
to do it.
well, I would tell Lee that once the frost starts out, do whatever he thinks he's doing. I mean, it's gonna be a safety issue, so it's really up to us to make sure we approve it.
Also on, at this meeting, Megan brought up the fact that on the recycling compactor, people tend to open the door when it's compacting.
They do?
Oh, no.
Well,
It's
George needs
not
to
a
be out
safety
there. George
problem
needs to
because
be out there watching it.
It's
He
got,
is,
no,
but
he is.
He's on one side, you
Yeah.
go on the other side.
So if you open it, it automatically shuts. It's not a safety
Yeah.
problem. There's a
Right.
magnet.
Right.
But what happens is once you do that, it shuts it all down.
and it has to. be
And then you have to recycle the whole thing. So that means another 2 minutes.
Right.
So it really messes things. So she
How
asked
often does this happen?
enough so it's really annoying,
We
especially in
have
the
a magnetic
summer.
sign saying, do not open.
Right.
It's
That's
gonna
what
take
she
twice
wants.
as
What he
long.
needs.
Can she
Yeah.
buy a couple of magnetic signs so she
Yeah.
can stick it on the?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
We certainly have that much in the budget.
Don't put beans in your ears.
All right, anything else?
That's all I got.
All right, so I'm gonna motion that we go into executive session pursuant to one MSRA subsection 4056E, which is consultation with legal counsel. So technically for the minute, Alice, we're interviewing.
Will you give me that? So I can afterwards.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
so it's the one, if you don't have a soft copy of this, I can send it to you, but it's the one for legal. You can see it sitting here. You can tomorrow. when we
Okay,
get
yeah,
the
that's fine.
I'll second.
Or whatever. All in favor?
So who motioned?
I motioned.
Oh,
I'm gonna shut
I'm gonna second
off
it.
the Zoom meeting.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna end that. Nobody's on it anyways. And for the large TV audience, thank you for your participation. And we're not gonna be, I don't think, taking official action or coming back on TV because we're not gonna tie up the TV crew.
will somebody keep track of when the session ends?
Yeah.